Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully, everybody can hear me. And let's see. So today's webinar is going to cover alarm notifications with Win911. Our very special guest, Mr. Stephen Rivas, will join us here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to give a quick overview of alarms within InduSoft Web Studio and kind of point you to the stuff that he's going to use to demonstrate. Also, I wanted to mention that Win911 has essentially set this up for an interface to InTouch Machine Edition, but what he's going to demonstrate with is InduSoft Web Studio. So if you see InTouch Machine Edition in there, it's really InduSoft Web Studio, so don't worry about it. It works fine with InduSoft Web Studio, and so just wanted to point that out as we get started. Again, for those of you who just joined us, I've seen quite a few people join us right at the top of the hour. If you have questions, put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel. Stephen or I will get to those during the presentation. So as we get going here, my name is Scott Courtier, Senior Technical Sales with InduSoft. I'm going to highlight just kind of a quick screenshot, maybe a demo, show you the demo of PC demo. That gets included and installed with InduSoft Web Studio when you install that. Then we're going to talk about kind of the two different interfaces that you have for alarms within InduSoft Web Studio. What's called the Alarm Event Control Object, that's what you see on the screen, and the Alarm Worksheet, and that's where you, one of the places where you can set up the alarms. After that should only take about 8 or 9 minutes or so. I'm going to hand things over to Stephen, where he's going to give an introduction to Win911, overview, and then a live demo, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But if you have your questions, put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel early so we can make sure that we get to everybody's and understand what's going on there. So quick overview of alarms. First of all, Stephen will be using the demo that I mentioned, and here's a screenshot from that. And this is the alarm. You can see up here at the top, there's the alarm online, then there's the alarm history. And if I tell you what, I think I have it running here. If you have the PC demo running and you go to the alarms screen, you can simulate analog and digital alarms. And this will give you an opportunity to be able to see and play and interact with those alarms. And see how we set things up. I often encourage you people to use the demo to see how did we set things up, how did we build it. So use this as a technical resource. Open up the application, steal from it, borrow from it, use it. So you can see here I've got digital alarm 1 and 2, got an analog alarm. I'll take that out of the alarm condition. We can acknowledge these alarms, put in a comment, and have that show up in the history. Show you that we can filter these alarms. See how I can bring up this pop-up box. I'm going to talk a bit about that in a second. Let me go back to the presentation here. So that's the interface that Stephen's going to be showing you or working with. I want to talk about tag properties, the alarm event control object, and then the worksheets. So tag properties, tags, first of all, are more than just a value. In addition to holding a value, there's properties kind of behind or associated with each tag. And if I go into the help system here and go under tag properties, a complete list of tag properties, you're going to see that I can get to all kinds of things associated with a tag. The name of the tag, the size if it's an array, the description, the quality. Timestamp is a really cool one. It'll tell you the time and date that the tag last changed value down to the millisecond. That can be handy. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit further and show you kind of the section related to alarms. So we can actually get to the properties associated with the alarm limits, such as the high limit, the low limit, the high, low, rate, limit, deviation, set point, plus and minus. So lots of things. We can also get at the programmatically, the properties will show you if any of those ranges have been hit. And notice also that some of these are read-writable and some of these are read-only. So you have to pay attention to that. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. the syntax to get to those properties, such as timestamp, the name, the description, you would use the tag name, a minus, greater than. It looks like a little arrow, but it's actually 2 characters, the minus sign or the hyphen, and then the greater than character, and then the name of the property. So, for example, temperature minus greater than high limit will get you to the high limit of that alarm set point for that temperature tag. But what's really neat, especially, is if you have, maybe all 4, maybe 6 or 7 different types of alarms on there, you don't have to consume extra tags to do that. That's actually the properties of that tag. And let's go back to the PowerPoint here. The alarm event control object is what you typically see on the screen, and that's either in historical mode or online mode. And actually, that object does more things. The reason it's called the alarm event control object because it will show you alarms or events or both. So you can filter that based on this type drop down here and see only alarm online, only alarm history, events and alarm history, or only events. So you get to choose that. What I want to point out also is that by default, this object sees all of the alarms present in the entire system, but you get the choice of filtering. Now, I brought up this box or very similar box. You can do that either during development time or during runtime. So, for example, if I'm in the runtime of this and I bring up that filter dialog box, I can choose whether or not I want to see or how I want to filter this. Maybe I want to see only the high limit alarms in here. So when I click on OK, it'll filter out those other alarms, and I can only see that. So you get a choice of how to do that, either, again, during development time or during runtime with this pop-up dialog box as well. In a lot of places in there, you can put tag names, so you can be very, very creative on what you do with that. So the alarm worksheet essentially configures the tag properties for those limits. So you can set up the high and the low and the high and the low, the messages, the different colors those can be, and how all those, the grouping of those, which will tie in with Win911. So lots of different flexibility there, capabilities. And with that, what I'm going to do is hand things over to Stephen.
All right, thank you. So, like Scott said, I'm Stephen Rivas. I'm the product manager here at Win911, and I'm responsible for the Win911 product I'm going to show you today. During my presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the I think there's a Q&A box. So as we go along, again, feel free to type in your questions there, and at the end of the presentation, we'll go ahead and answer those for you. So what I'm going to talk about today is specifically focused on our new InduSoft Web Studio data source that we recently released, I think just about a week and a half ago, wasn't too long ago, and give a general overview of the Win911 product if you're not familiar with it. If you just randomly have stumbled upon this webinar, Win911 is alarm notification software. So what we specialize in is grabbing alarms out of a SCADA system like Web Studio as they're configured, and allow you to escalate alarms and send them out through a variety of different notification methods that we call those notifiers. So why would you want to use Win911? What value do you get out of it? I would say the first thing would be alarm escalation, or making sure you're getting alarms to the right person that can do something about that alarm. So with our call-out lists, or tactics as we call them, you can create as many contact lists as you like to make sure that you're getting alarms to the appropriate person to act on it. 24/7 operations. A lot of our customers have unmanned sites where they can't have someone sitting in front of a control panel all day, so they run Win911 there, and we monitor the alarms there, and we can pull them out and send them to an operator wherever he may be, whether he's out in the field or at home sleeping. We can wake him up with an alarm so he can take an action of some kind. And that follows along with alarm notification beyond the control room. We're basically extending visibility to your alarm and event summary. So you don't have to be in front of the machine. You can use any one of our notifiers to get a visual of what alarms are active in your system at any particular time. And all of our notifiers support those, so it doesn't matter if you're using text messaging or voice or the mobile app, you can at any time request the alarms that you want to see and see what's going on in your system at that particular time. Some of the industries, these are some of the industries that our customers are using Win91 in. We got our start really, or we really made a name for ourselves in the water, wastewater industry. So a lot of our customers only think we're applicable to that particular industry, which is not the case. I mean, if you have an automated system, say you're using Web Studio in any one of these industries, then Win91 likely applies to you. So if you have alarms that you need to send out to your users or operators, then Win91 is likely a good fit for it. And another thing to think about, most people think of Win91 is sending or escalating alarms only, but technically you can create alarms that are events. So instead of just thinking of it as an alarm that you need to take an act on or an action on, you could technically create alarms that just tell people to do certain things. For example, there's a particular customer that is using Win91 to notify snowplow operators that it's their time to go out and get in the snowplow and go plow a certain road. So it's not just alarming that we can do. Granted, we are interpreting alarms as a message, but I think you kind of get the picture of where I'm trying to go there. So what does the typical notification process look like? So if you have a SCADA system like Web Studio, an alarm occurs. This is what a notification process would look like without Win91, I suppose. An alarm occurs, you need to figure out who you need to notify. Maybe you have a list of people, maybe you have someone working a front desk that just knows who needs to be notified. And then they need to check to see if that person's available. Are they working today? Who's on schedule? Who can actually respond? And how can you notify them? Do you call them? Do you page them? Do you send an email, SMS? There can be a variety of different ways to notify somebody. So once you attempt to notify that person, you wait to see if they respond. If they don't respond, then you move on to the next person. And if they don't respond, you move on to the next person. So you're manually going through this process. If they do respond, then obviously your issue is resolved. But this process here is what we've done with it is we've automated it. So now if you use Win91, an alarm occurs, you use Win91 to create a configuration that takes into account all of those things to make sure that you are notifying the right person when you need to take care of an alarm condition. So with Win91, you can, like I was saying, you can automate that entire process so that you don't have to have a person manually going through a step-by-step list or whatever it may be that your particular facility does currently. So it's important to get the alarms to the right people at the right time. So kind of some examples of what I mean by that is if you have a technician, getting the alarm to that person quicker using an automated system can improve response time and reduce downtime. So if they know about an alarm condition quicker, then they can respond to it quicker. So instead of having to wait around for a process or for either they just to find out there's an alarm or someone calls them manually, if you have an automated system, that will obviously go much quicker. You can also send alarms to engineers so they have more visibility into the system so that they can see if something continuously is in alarm, then maybe it's time to plan some maintenance for that or replace a particular asset. You can also have management involved in your notification or your escalation. So management can get a view into what's going on, so they can change scheduling or escalate alarms if no one's responding to particular alarms, or just go scold somebody for not responding to alarm. You can also get security involved if there are alarms like gates are opening and saying open that shouldn't be, so stuff like that. So really can send alarms to anyone at your facility that could help make your operation more efficient. So what I want to do is just give you guys a general overview of the Win91 product. So the Win91 product is what we call it modular. So what we mean by that is there are several components and they all work together to make alarm notification possible. So the first component would be a data source. So what we're talking about today is the Web Studio data source. So we released that recently. What a data source job is to connect to a SCADA system and pull alarm and data information out of it. Once we have that information, we need to send it on to what we call our dispatcher. This is going to be the central logic engine that where all your escalation is configured, and the dispatcher then determines who needs to be notified for a particular alarm and sends it to a notifier. A notifier are our actual notification methods, so we support email, SMS, voice, and our mobile app, which I'll talk more about in a later slide. So what we're going to talk about is this Web Studio data source. So how this works, to give you just another view of the architecture here, if we connect the Web Studio data source to Web Studio, then once the data source gets it, we send it over to the dispatcher. And again, the dispatcher is going to figure out who needs to be notified for this alarm depending on your configuration. So once it does that, it will send it to the appropriate notification method. We also support something we call reporting, and reporting allows you to request a report or send out a report with an alarm. And our reports are basically snapshots of the system at any particular time in real time. So if I request a report, what it's going to do is it's going to tell me the value of any tags that I have in that report or the alarm state of any alarms that I have in that particular report. Again, if we have some time, I'll show you guys that in the live demo. So what are some of the advantages of using Web Studio? The primary benefit would be that your alarms are configured in Web Studio only. You don't have to configure the alarms in Win911 as well. So all your descriptions there are configured, your priorities, your tag names, all that stays in Web Studio. Win911 just ties into it and can pull those alarms out dynamically using alarm subscriptions, which I'll just talk about in just a moment. Another advantage of our direct connect or data source is that we can do remote connections to your project. We're utilizing the TCP/IP server that's built into Web Studio, so because of that, we can connect through the network. We can also run on the same box as Web Studio. You don't have to run this on a separate machine. And we can also monitor multiple projects, so you can have one Win911 system monitoring several different Web Studio projects at the same time. And instead of having to have, I don't know, if you had 3 projects, instead of having 3 Win911 systems, you'd have one, and you can monitor all 3 of them with that one Win911 system. Our alarm subscriptions are how we get alarms into Win911, and what an alarm subscription is a way for us to subscribe to alarms that have certain criteria or properties. So what I mean by that is I can create a subscription that says if an alarm belongs to this group or the alarm has some particular text in its alarm message or alarm name or tag name, then that subscription will bring those alarms in. I'll show you this in the next slide. But what this gives you the ability to do is dynamically receive alarms. So if I create my subscriptions that are filtering on, let's say, the group, and I add a new tag to that group, that tag will automatically come into Win911, and you won't have to change anything in our software, just changing it in Web Studio. Some more advantages of using the Web Studio data source are you can acknowledge alarms. That acknowledgement is seamless. So if you acknowledge an alarm within Win911, then that alarm will be acknowledged in Web Studio and vice versa. So if you act it in Web Studio, it gets act in Win911. You also have that ability to do alarm request and report requests that I talked about earlier, and a localization. If you are using Web Studio in a non-English language, that's totally fine. We can receive those alarm messages in any language that you want. The UI itself that we have is localized into 9 different languages. So if you are using it in a non-English environment, we tried to target the most common languages, but if there is one that we don't target, just let us know, and we can somewhat easily add those translations for different languages. So here, hold on, I don't want to install any updates. That would be catastrophic, I suppose. Here is an image or a screenshot of what an alarm subscription looks like within the Win91 product. So these are the different properties that we can filter on. The first one would be an alarm worksheet number or a group number. On the right, you can see from the PC demo, we have 3 different alarm sheets or worksheets or groups, whatever you want to call them. And we can filter on those numbers. So I can say, if an alarm is in the first group, then I want just those alarms. Or if it's in the second group, I just want those alarms, or the third. So I can create a subscription for each one of those. I can also filter on the message field. So I can create a wildcard filter on the message field. In this example, if I wanted to pull in this alarm that is in the screenshot at the bottom, if I chose specific messages and typed in the word digital, any alarm that goes active that has the word digital in the message would match this subscription and would come into Win911. You can also do this with tag names. Same kind of deal with a string wildcard. We can also do priority. So in Web Studio, let's say 0 is your high priority. I only care about high priority alarms. So I create a subscription that says, give me all the alarms that are priority 0. Then if an alarm occurs and is that priority, comes into Win911. Maybe this subscription, you set it to a call-out list that notifies people immediately. And you have another subscription that brings in lower priority alarms and sends to a call-out list that has a built-in delay of maybe 10 or 15 minutes to give the alarm some time to normalize before actually calling anyone. The last one would be selection. This is a grouping option within Web Studio. This is just a string field, so it's the same thing as the message and tag names. You can type in a wildcard type deal to match whatever you would have in a selection. So this is a subscription. You can create as many of these subscriptions as you want, and these subscriptions are then tied to a strategy and a call-out list, which I'm going to talk about here in just a second. So your alarms are what happened, and we talked about how to get your how you get your alarms into Win911 with a subscription. Your strategies are the policies of what or when you want Win911 to do something. So it's a group of policies of rules of what Win911 should do given a certain alarm condition. And one of the things that strategies do is they launch a tactic, and a tactic is a call-out list. So if you hear me say tactic, you can think of just a call-out list. So alarms are assigned to a strategy, and a strategy determines when to notify or what to do given a certain alarm condition, and the strategy launches a tactic, which is your call-out list. Here's an example of what a strategy looks like. If I have an initial event, then which means the first alarm I'm getting from Web Studio, I probably want to start a tactic, which is my call-out list. If the alarm state changes, I would want to re-notify. And if the alarm becomes acknowledged, which means I probably don't want to notify anymore on this alarm, I can stop my strategy. If there's a repeating timer, I can re-notify people every 20 minutes as long as the alarm is not acknowledged. These are just a few of the options that are available in a strategy. It's just an example. You can have your system do whatever you like. Once you have your strategy configured, you can start to look at your call-out list. This is a basic tactic, so a basic call-out list. It's we call it a simple call-out list. You add people into a list that you want them to be notified in. You can configure delays and retries. So if you want to notify Bob, wait some amount of time before you go on to the next person, you can do that with delay after. The retries are there for when there's a failure, sending a notification. So if you try to send an email and your email server's down, it'll retry. If you want to notify somebody multiple times, you would just put them in the list multiple times. You wouldn't use the retries for that. You can also see there's a delay before notification. I was talking about that earlier. If maybe you wanted to send out if you have an alarm and you're waiting 5 minutes or 10 minutes for it to clear before you ever get to this call-out list, and you can do that here. Next would be an advanced tactic. It's the same. The purpose of a tactic is the same. Its purpose is to notify people that there is an alarm condition. Advanced tactics just go about that in a different way. It's using a flow chart, and the image you see on the left is how it looks in the software. So what we're doing is we're starting at this green dot. So an alarm occurs. We launch this tactic, and it's coming to what we call a decision block. So we call all of these blocks, but we call this a decision block. And it's going to make a decision depending on certain criteria of the alarm. So this is checking for what we call an alarm label. An alarm label is it's kind of a tag that you can attach to alarms. So if I create a subscription, and let's say that subscription was from the water group that's in the PC demo, I could create a label that is called the same thing, so I know that all those alarms are tagged with that label. So if it is, so in this example, if this is a water treatment plant storage tank alarm, I'll go to the right. If it's not, I would go to the left, and in this case, nothing would happen. You'd probably want to put something on the left side because that would mean nobody gets notified. But if it is a storage tank alarm, I'll branch out to the right, and then I'm going to do a severity decision block or a priority decision block where I'm checking to see what the priority of an alarm is. In this example, 0 is the minimum, 1,000 is the highest, so I'm saying if anything is higher than 750, then I'll go to the right and immediately notify my operators and managers. If it's lower than 750, so it's a lower priority, then I'll wait 10 minutes for it to clear, and then I'll notify my operator. So advanced tactics are a different way to do your escalation. So you can do basic tactics or advanced tactics or both at the same time. It's totally up to what will work for your configuration. Next is scheduling. So we have a schedule tool that you can use to create schedules for individual contacts, or you can share a schedule. If you know how to use the Gmail calendar or an Outlook calendar, then you should feel right at home using this calendar. The main point or the main purpose of this is to create appointments of when people will, or windows, time windows, or shifts, whatever you want to call it, of when people are available for alarms. So if you were working 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., you would create it's called an appointment in the software. You create a window for that time frame, and if an alarm occurs during that time and it's supposed to go to you, we'll check the schedule to make sure you're on schedule, and if you are, then we'll notify you. Otherwise, if you're off schedule, then you don't get the notification. You can use schedules in advanced tactics too, like the flow chart I just showed you. You can make a decision based on time. So I could say, if an alarm occurs Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, notify the normal operators, otherwise notify whoever I have on call at that particular time. So that's the scheduling. And here are our notification methods. On the left, we've got the mobile app. This is a mobile app that runs on iOS or Android devices. This does require the internet. So if you want to use this, you have to have internet access for where you're running what we call the mobile 911 server. There's more information about that on our website if you're interested in setting that up. Next would be SMS. These are text messages that we're sending with a cellular modem. We support and sell the multi-tech modems. And there are two types that we support. One is serial or USB modems that plug directly into your computer. If you don't want to do that, then you can use their Ethernet-based cellular modems that you plug into a network switch, and then you access those modems through a telnet session by telling Win911 what IP address that particular modem is at. So if you're in a VM environment and you can't pass hardware to your particular VM, then that would probably be a good option for you. Next would be voice. This is where we'll call you and verbalize the alarm information so you can get a phone call about it. There are two options for that. You can do voice over IP, so we can interface with your current voice system at the plant or at an office. If you have pretty much any VoIP system out there like Cisco or ShoreTel or Avaya, they all support what we use, which is called SIP protocol. So you basically make an account for the Win911 system in your voice server and then provide Win911 the details to connect to it and register to it so it can send and receive phone calls. And that's another good solution if you are in a VM environment so that you don't have to attach a modem to the machine to make phone calls. But that is the other option. Analog phone lines, if you have those, you can still use them with a TAPI modem. This is a USB modem that attaches to your computer, and you can make phone calls through that analog modem. Last one is email. We can send and receive email notifications using SMTP for outgoing and POP or IMAP for incoming. You can choose the format that you want to use and send an email out and just reply to it, and you can acknowledge that alarm. The same is true for all of these notifiers. I really didn't touch on that, but they all have the ability to send a message to you, and then you can reply back and acknowledge the alarm. The exception to that is voice. So you're not really replying back. You're listening to a call, and you're pushing a number to acknowledge the alarm once it's reading it out to you. So what we'll do now is take a look at a live demo. So I think I've got that here. There we go. All right. So I am running the PC demo. What we're going to do is configure Win911 to talk to it and pull some alarms out of it. I did mention earlier that the way we are communicating with Web Studio is through the TCP/IP server. So to make sure that's even possible, you have to make sure that's turned on. So if you go to your task list, you can see that I have TCP/IP server runtime set to automatic. If that's not turned on, then you won't be able to connect. Another thing worth mentioning is if you are using security, you need to make sure excuse me, that the group that you are using has this particular feature turned on called Enable Remote Security System and Remote Debugging Tools. If that's not turned on, then you won't be able to connect. I also recommend, I'm not doing it for this demo, but you might want to create an individual user just for Win911, just for more transparency as to what's going on in the system. For this, I'm just going to use the guest account. So you need to, I wanted to talk about that before we actually connect. The alarms that we'll be connecting to are in these three different groups. So we've got the alarms groups, these are simulation tags, and we've got the water tags and the wind tags. I'm not going to bring these water tags in because they go in and out of alarm constantly so fast that we probably won't be able to do anything with them. So what we're going to do is we'll configure Win911 to pull alarms from this group and this group. And then we'll send those notifications out, reply to an email, and acknowledge one of those alarms. So I'll go ahead and run the project. Jump over to the alarm screen. And you can see there are alarms coming in here. So earlier Scott was talking about how you can configure these alarm and event controls, and you saw that you can do some filtering within on those controls. So that's very similar to how Win911 is going to pull alarms out. So let's go check out the Win911 configuration. For this demo, we're going to do email. So this is the UI. It's in a web browser, which means you can access it anywhere within your network. So as long as you have network access to this machine, then you can get into it. It is secured with Windows authentication, so you have to provide a username and password before you can edit anything. So again, I'm going to use email for this. So every notifier is split into 3 different sections: a gateway, connections, and formats. A gateway is how this notifier connects to the outside world. So for email, it's going to be your email server settings. Connections are who you're going to actually notify. So these are people and their email addresses in the particular alarm formats you want them to use. And then the Formats tab allows you to create custom formats in case some of the ones we ship with it, you don't like them and you want to put something different. So for email, I've got everything configured in here already for an Exchange server. This is just the Exchange server I've hosted over here. I can use this test button, and you type in an email address to send a test to. So if I send that to my email, it's going to send a message to me. That message is going to tell me how to use the system, how to interact with it, rather. And if you do set this, if you download our software off our website to demo this, make sure that you use a dedicated email account for this, because we will erase all the email from the inbox. So don't use your personal email account for sending and receiving mail with Win911, because you won't have a good time if you do that. So I'm using this dedicated gateway account that I created for it. So if you're going to do incoming mail, you just got to configure that as well. So it's the same thing. Type in, you choose POP or IMAP, and you set that up. So once you have that set up, you can go create your connections. I've created 5 connections already. Regardless of the type of notification you're doing, whether it's email, mobile, SMS, voice, we try to keep the format or the setup the same. So every notifier is going to have a general tab, a format tab, some ACK options, and alarm request options. So what we're looking for here on the general tab is typically what's the name of the connection, a description if you need to provide more context to what this connection is for, an email address. If you're doing email, if you're doing SMS, you obviously want to put a phone number there. If you're doing voice, same thing, put a phone number. And for mobile, it's a unique identifier for your mobile device. You choose a schedule. For all of these guys, I've already set always to them, so we're just going to leave it on always. And then you can see I've got this send welcome message. It does the same thing as the gateway does. It sends an email to this person to tell them how to use the system. The next tab is for alarm format. This is where you choose what format you want to use for the alarm notification. I'm using an HTML format for this. This is where you choose the report format, so how a report would appear to you. ACK options are where you configure whether this person can acknowledge alarms or not. I have them all set for ACK on any reply. That means if I get an alarm message, I can reply to it and acknowledge the alarm. The other options here would be to ACK with a password, which means I have to type in some string into the body of the email that I reply with. Or I can say do not allow. This person just doesn't have the ability to acknowledge. Last tab is for alarm request options. If I was using alarm labels, so I created some labels that match those the groups within the PC demo. So let's say I selected those. Now when this person goes to request alarms, they're only going to get a response if those alarms have these particular labels on them. If I only had one label on there, then that means they will only get alarms that are belonging to the industry's water label. So it's a way if you have a big system or if you're monitoring multiple projects that have nothing to do with one another, and when a user for one project requests alarms, you need to make sure that he only sees alarms for one of those projects. This is the way you would do that. Otherwise, you would get alarms from all the projects that you were monitoring. So I'll leave it on. Well, actually, I'll just cancel this because I don't want to make any changes to it. And that last tab is utilizers. It shows you where you're using these connections. So this connection is in a tactic that I currently have called Tactic 3. So once you have all your connections made, then you can set up your escalation. First, I'll set up a tactic. So I have 3 tactics made. So tactic 1, I've just made these 3 tactics and put some people in there. It really doesn't matter. And let's edit one of them. Let's edit the first one. So you can see the options here. So when you're creating a tactic, which again is your call-out list, you need to give it a name. You can give it a description if you want. And this would be the delay before. So if I needed to wait some amount of time before I start sending notifications to people, I can do that here. So earlier I said, what if you needed a 10-minute delay before starting notification? You could do that right there. If I want to repeat this list after it goes through, I can do that here. And this is where I add people into my list. So right now I have Frank and Jay in there. If I wanted to add more, I hit this plus button and I would choose someone else and add them into the list. If maybe I wanted Brian to be first, I would move him up to the top. If I want to wait some amount of time before moving on from Brian to Frank, I can do that here. So now it'll email Brian, wait 5 minutes, then email Frank, and then immediately email Jay. So if I want to put delays between these connections, I can do that here. So I've created 3 of these tactics already. If I wanted to create an advanced tactic, I could. I don't think I'm going to do that for the demo, but just to show you what that looks like. If I actually maybe I just will. If I drag a decision block, a label decision block, I can configure it. I'm going to say, does it belong to the alarms group? Then I could then notify a group of people. Let's say operators, because I don't have any roles set up. Roles are a way you can group your contacts together, just like you can group your alarms together. So if it's not an alarm, if it's not an alarm with the alarms label on it, then I would probably check for another one. So I can nest these. So let's say it was the wind group, then I could check for that, and then I could notify a different group of people, and so on. So I could just keep branching these down. The benefit of doing this versus over the basic tactic is that I'm not putting anyone's name in here, as you may notice. So that means you're creating a dynamic workflow for notification. If I create a new, I already have the dynamic connection to alarms with my alarm subscriptions, but if I were to add a new person, so if I jump over to contacts where I have some contacts already made, and I edit this, I can add those roles to these people. So Brian's now an operator, and now Frank's an operator, maybe Jay is a manager. When I'm creating these tactics, now I gotta close out of here because it shouldn't have gone away, and it'll draw a little funky sometimes if you switch off the screen like that. So if I'm checking for alarms, and if the group I need to notify for alarms is operate, come on, drag it on there, is the operators group, any contact wearing that operator's role will then get the notification. So as I add new people to the Win911 system and I'm doing notification with these advanced tactics, then I just need to make sure I assign that new person with the appropriate role so that they're inserted into this escalation. So that's how you would use advanced tactics. I'm not going to use that for this demo though. Strategies, this is where you control what Win911 is going to do given a certain alarm condition. So I've created an alarm strategy and an industry's water strategy already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a third one for the wind group. So if I go to hit the plus button and give it a name, so Industries Wind Strategy, I'll go into advanced mode here so you can see what we're doing. So what I'm going to do here is on an initial event, so I get an alarm, what do I want to do? I want to start a tactic, and for the wind one, I want to start tactic number 3, I guess. So I choose tactic number 3, and I click OK. And if I have an alarm state change, what do I want to do? Well, I want to re-notify anyone that had been notified previously about the alarm so they get the update, so they have the most current information. And if the alarm becomes terminal or is normalized, which means the alarm is inactive and acknowledged, then I'll stop the strategy. If I wanted to stop the strategy on acknowledgement, which means I'll stop notification when the alarm gets acknowledged, I just have to choose that drop down. If I wanted to do that repeating timer from that screenshot you saw earlier, I choose that and I choose some time to do my timer. So if I wanted to do every 30 minutes, I would choose that there. So every 30 minutes before it gets acknowledged, I want to re-notify. So if I get the alarm, I notify some people, 30 minutes goes by, the alarm hasn't been acknowledged, my timer is going to tick, I'm going to re-notify. And if another 30 minutes goes by, I'm going to re-notify. When the alarm gets acknowledged, I will stop the strategy. The order of these conditions does not matter. Our policies do not matter because it is driven by a particular condition. The order is meaningless. So I'll save this strategy. All right, now let's talk about how we actually get alarms. Again, it says InTouch ME, but it's the same thing as Web Studio, so you can just ignore that. I've created 2 subscriptions already. This all alarm subscription is just built in. So I've got a subscription that will match the alarms group here. So this group is group 1. So what I did is I created a subscription that filters on group 1. So if I wanted to monitor multiple groups, then I can add them in here with a particular subscription, but I don't want to do that with this subscription. I have a separate one where I'm looking at group 2, and if I wanted to make a third one for the wind group, I would type that in here, and then I would choose my worksheet number. I think that was number 3, so I type in the number 3. So now this one will subscribe to alarms that belong to that group. I could do more filtering if I wanted, if maybe I had some kind of unifying text within my message field that would be a good thing to subscribe on or filter on. I could do that. Same thing with tag names, or if maybe I was doing only high priority alarms, so let's say that was a 0, that's your high priority, or maybe 255 is your high priority, however you have it configured, then you can do that too. And then the last one was that selections, which is another string-based filter. So I was talking about labels earlier, so we might as well use one. So this one is the wind. So if I attach a label to this subscription, any alarm that matches the subscription will have this label appended to it. Let's do that for the other ones. So this one's for alarms, so I've created a label for alarms. And this was the water, so I can do that for the water. And then I can save it. So the runtime, the configuration is runtime all the time, so anytime I hit the save button, these changes take effect immediately. I'm not currently connected to a project, so those changes don't actually do anything. So if I want to connect to a project, I have to give it a user-friendly name. So if I say my project, I tell it which server it's on. It's running on the same machine, so I'm going to type localhost. This is a port number that your TCP server is running on. 1234 is the default. If you were using security, you'd turn that on and type in the username and password. I can test my connection to see if I can connect to Web Studio, and I can. I can look at some of the other tabs here. This one is the health tab. So this is a health alarm that will be generated if you cannot communicate with the project that you've configured. So if you lose network connectivity or Web Studio shuts down, this alarm becomes active, and you can send it to somebody that will come check out the machine and make sure everything's running correctly. This you have to assign this particular alarm to a strategy so that you would be notifying some set of people. I'm just going to leave it on default for now. Watchdog alarms allow you to watch a particular tag for an updating value. If you don't see a change from that tag within a certain amount of time, then you can create an alarm. So what some of our customers use this for is to monitor PLCs. So maybe you have a minute time or minute tag in a PLC, and you're watching that and for a change every 60 seconds. Well, if I don't see a change within 90 seconds, then I know I'm not communicating with that PLC. But you can use watchdogs for a variety of different things. But then it would become active, and you can become aware of that failure. And then the last thing, our subscription routes. We created those subscriptions already, but now we need to apply them to the project. So if I click this plus button, here are all the subscriptions I made, and here are the strategies that I made. So if I hit the drop down, I'm going to create this alarm subscription. That's going to give me the SIM alarms from Web Studio, and I'm going to send that to the alarm strategy that I made. I'm not going to bring in the water alarms because they go in and out of alarm constantly, and I don't want to send hundreds of emails right now. So we'll just ignore that one for now, and we'll do the wind So we'll do wind alarms too. So I'm going to pull out any alarms that belong to the alarms group and the wind group. And so when I hit save, it's going to connect to my project and start getting alarms from Web Studio. I can see that by going to my log viewer, and the alarms will start popping up in here. You can see the labels are being pinned to the particular alarms. And if I was using advanced tactics, or I was using that alarm request filtering or restriction within the connections screen, I could do that there too. So if I click on one of these alarms, so let's say this analog one, I can see who's being notified. So this alarm is being sent to the tactic 1. Well, it's going to this strategy, alarm strategy, which is saying on initial event and start this tactic. And this tactic has these two guys in it, Frank and Jay. If I want to see what that alarm looks like, I can log into that email account. What was it? It was Frank was one of them. So if I backspace that guy, if I log into Frank's account, set a time zone because I guess I've never logged into it, I can see this alarm that I was just sent, and these are the details of the alarm. If I want to act this alarm, then I just need to reply to it and hit send. Win91 checks its inbox every minute for incoming mail. So once it receives that message, it will attempt to acknowledge the alarm. If we were to sit here on this acknowledgement tab, where you can see it just got acknowledged by email, and you can see that here. If we go back to this overview screen, you can see there's a check mark. If we click on this notifications tab, you can see alarms coming in and the notifications being sent for them. And I believe, which one was that? It was this one here. You can see that the comment for this alarm becomes the Win911 user that acted. And I act one of them with the log viewer itself, so that's why it says log viewer. This is the one that I just acknowledged through email. That's how you do. That's how you can connect to Web Studio and send your alarms out and reply and acknowledge. All our notifiers support acknowledgement. So if I did it with a voice notification, it would say Frank dash. If I had a Frank voice connection, it would say Frank voice. One last thing I wanted to show you guys before I wrap up the demo. There is another way to bring your alarms into Win911, and that would be with an import. So instead of using subscriptions, you can actually point to individual tags. So we've created this import utility to do that. So you browse to your tag file within your database folder for your particular project. You open it, it'll scan it for tags. You click next. You can find, it'll give you a list of the tags here. Let's see, I think I wanted to do one. these food ones I know will work for what I want to show you guys. So I'll choose those tags. If I wanted to add labels to them, I could, but I'll move those over, and then I'll go to next. I don't think they actually have any alarms, but if they did have alarms, I would choose those here. So I don't have anything to do here, so I'll just click next. And now I've imported those 3 tags. If I go to this tag list, you'll see them here. If I want to add those tags to a report, let me delete these reports because they don't work anymore because I deleted what they had in them. So I'll make a new report. I'll make it report 1. I'll call it the food report because it's got food tags in it. So if I hit the plus button, I can see those tags I've imported and say OK. So if I request this report, then it will tell me the value of those tags. I'll save it. If I go over to Frank's email, I'll create a new email notification. I'll send it to the Win911 system. And I just need to type in what I want. I want report 1. And hit send. So once it receives that message, it's going to send me the report back with the values of those tags. While we're waiting for that, you could also use a tactic to push a report. So if I created an advanced tactic that says notify Frank for an alarm, so I'm notifying him for an alarm, but then after that, I can send a report to him too. I can send 2 things. So now this is going to say send that report to Frank. So if this, let's say this alarm I was sending was some type of food alarm, then the next thing I do is send him a report that has other related information to that food alarm. Or it could be a water tank alarm, and then you're sending a report with other water tank values. So that's how you can push a report to your users. So here is my food report response that I got. You can see the value for all those tags are 0, so that's what it says, but if they had different values, you can see that in a report. Okay, so I think I've talked about just about everything I wanted to cover in the demo. So if you guys, let me jump back to my PowerPoint, because I wanted to show you. If you have any questions about Win911, you can go to our website. We have webinars, brochures, case studies, a price list if you're interested in the different license levels. So all this is available on our website. So feel free to go there. The software is also available here as a demo. It's fully functional demo for 30 days, so you can do whatever you want with it. It's fully licensed. So go download it there, and if you need to extend that demo time, just let us know, and we'll be happy to extend it for you. If you have questions about the product itself, again, you can type them into the chat right now, but if you think of questions later on, feel free to send me an email. If you have sales questions, feel free to contact our sales department. If you just have feedback about the product or you have feature requests, feel free to send those to me, because we're always more than happy to get feedback from our users to make sure we're building things that you guys want. So with that, I think I will turn it back over to Scott for any questions, if there are any questions.
Stephen, great. Thank you very much. I learned more again this afternoon than I did this morning. As Stephen had mentioned, everybody, we're open for questions now. One of the questions that I had, Stephen, was, does this take any additional InduSoft tags to configure? It doesn't look like it does.
Oh, no. So, no, not at all. So the whole point of the data source is that you can easily tie into your previous configuration within the project. I would say that the toolkit that we got from InduSoft is one of the best toolkits we've ever worked with when it comes to integrating with a SCADA system, and that's why we can filter alarms on so many different properties. So by being able to filter alarms on so many different properties, it's easier to integrate Win911 to your system, because totally depends on the previous configuration and how you grouped your alarms together within the Web Studio project. So you may have to change some things if you want to do some type of grouping that's not already there, but chances are, given all the filtering options, that we'll be able to subscribe to alarms in a meaningful way, or maybe you just want to subscribe to every alarm all the time, and that would be easy enough to do as well.
Great. Yeah, so in general, it doesn't take any additional tags to be able to do it.
Nope. Yeah, you don't have to set up any custom tags or anything like that.
Right. No handshaking. It just looks like everything's handled through the interface. Again, everybody, we've got it open for questions. If you have any questions, put those into the Q&A or the chat panel on the WebEx interface. Stephen, another question that I had was, what if you need to monitor multiple InduSoft applications? Can that be done?
Yeah, absolutely. So I touched on that a little bit earlier. When you buy the Win91 system, you can connect to one Web Studio or project. If you want to add an additional Web Studio project to your configuration, you have to add that into your Win91 license. But you can monitor as many projects as it is feasible. I mean, you probably wouldn't be monitoring 100 of them with one system. But if you needed to monitor 5 projects, with all their own separate call-out lists and separate strategies, and that's totally fine and doable with the the Web Studio data source that we made.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to take presentation status back from you here. While I'm doing that, again, just a reminder, we're open for questions. At this time, we don't have any questions in the queue, but I'd like to leave everybody with just a reminder. You know, as I pointed out, InduSoft has got its own alarming setup, and it does great for what it does. It does some simple emails and some other things like that. But where I think Win911 is going to excel and be a really nice add-on for InduSoft is the workflow capabilities. You can see from the interface that Stephen presented, it's a really nice interface that shows you that workflow, that escalation. The voice piece of it is something that InduSoft does not have built in. So, you know, the add-on capabilities, the workflow, the escalation, the voice, really nice complement to what InduSoft has. And Stephen, I got to give you guys and the team a compliment because it came off pretty well. Stephen, do you have any comments at this point?
Just to reiterate, if you guys have questions later on, feel free to shoot them over to me. If you have questions about sales type or sales related things, then feel free to contact our sales department. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to join the webinar. And I believe, I don't know if, I think Scott's already said this, but we'll be recording this and hosting this up, so if you guys need to watch it later, you can show your friends.
I always tell people if they want to put the kids to sleep at night, they can put it on the TV at home.
Sure.
All right. We've got a couple of comments and compliments coming in. Thank you very much for that. And Stephen, I'd like to thank you for co-hosting with us. Really appreciated it. With that, there's no questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. So, Stephen, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks again, everybody.
And thank you, our entire audience. Thanks for joining us. Join us again on another webinar. Thanks. Have a great day.